for staying. I think this is going to be the session where you learn the secrets from one of Europe's most valuable companies. So I think it'll be hopefully a good one. I'm Paul Murphy. I'm a partner at Lightspeed. Lightspeed is a global venture capital fund based in Silicon Valley. Latest set of funds were about 9 billion, large funds, but we actually focus on early stage in most cases. I lead the team in Europe. We're investors in a number of AI companies that you would have heard of, the Anthropic, Mistral, Helsing, Anduril, a number of others, and now recently ElevenLabs. So really excited to talk to Carlos and hear some of the stories. So do you want to introduce yourself?
100%, and thank you for having me here as well. Hi everyone, I'm Carles. I head the go-to-market side at ElevenLabs. I was the first investor for them, and I also have my own fund called Baobab Ventures. And for anyone that doesn't know ElevenLabs these days, we build our own foundational models for like AI voices back in the day, 4 years ago. And then we've scaled now to do like both foundational model layer for voice, transcription, music, a number of things. And also we have like an agentic layer of product on top of it where companies can deploy AI agents that interact with customers. 500+ million in revenues in 3.5 years. Operating globally all the way from like US to Australia and every other country in between. So it's been pretty nice.
Cool. Yeah, it's an understatement. It's an incredible story. Carlos, there's not that many people that, in fact, I don't think I know anyone that was both the first investor and one of the first 5 employees in a startup, especially that became this successful. So tell us about that. What did you see the others missed? How did that happen?
It was very simple. I just wanted to protect my money. It was like, look, I will give you some money, but like you just need to hire me. No, but I think like, so back in the day when I met Matty and Piotr through a common friend, we had been building another company for AI voices that was called Sonantic. We ended up selling it to Spotify. And of course, Matty couldn't know because the process was still fully confidential. And one of the key concepts or one of the key problems that we're having back in the day in the other company was this problem, like the voices sounded okay, but like they were not contextually aware, meaning that like you had to use SSML tags, which is like something out of like doesn't exist anymore, or like still exists, but like in a very small amount, where you would essentially pick a word and say this is like a number, or you need to like capitalize this, or you need to like do that, or you need to actually change how you pronounce this. So that's essentially how you would do it with SSML. And when I met Matty, one of the founders of ElevenLabs, he was still a Palantir. And then we started talking for the first 30 minutes, and then he kept talking about this concept of like contextual awareness. And his problem that he was seeing is like voices can be used for like content creation, for dubbing and preserving like voice and all of that stuff, but they need to be contextually aware because you cannot change every single word in a single line if you want to make it scalable. And that for me was the trigger. It was like, he's not in the industry today. He just has an idea of how he would want to actually build a company with AI voices. If he's able to deliver like even like the contextual aware part, nothing about like voices sounding natural or engaging or anything like that, only the contextual aware part, that's going to change the entire industry. And that's when I decided to commit.
So it's a great backstory. What I'm curious about is that's, the ElevenLabs business we know today is different to what it was when you joined. It was kind of API platform transferred now to it's an audio platform in a way. I'd be curious to hear, about that transition, that shift. What drove that from the inside?
Yeah. So and for the context, like, so I joined, and then like employee number 4, we launched the first product. We went from 0 to 0 users to 1 million users in 30 days. And within those 30 days, we had the first 2 enterprise contracts signed as well. And it was all about like content creation, right? It was like UI, we still had some API endpoints, but like it was only English, voice cloning, all of that stuff, but very simple kind of core. And we were having this idea, like this mission of like making content universally accessible for people. Non-real time, everything like based on batch generation, right? So you input stuff, wait a few seconds, like output comes out. And then what we ended up realizing over the past of the months is like the world was moving towards like a real-time content generation platform. So companies and businesses and startups wanted to actually create things real time. So we ended up like doing all of the core research to actually build the first turbo model, which was the fastest in the market, multilingual and all of that stuff. And over the years, we've seen the full transition where like the company has gone from like being like this like content for like accessibility and engaging and all of that stuff, all the way to like enabling human technology interactions. But that wasn't actually that clear for us. So what we did early on was like we would have tests and things that we would be running every single week. So we have like a list of like tests that we would want to run, and we're like, okay, this week we want to run like 12 things. Let's see which one actually gives us some results. If one of those ones gives us a result, then we'll continue it. If multiple of them give us results, we will continue both of them, or 3. But usually the majority of them would fail. And that's how we ended up finding product market fit and realizing that the market was moving towards like a real time, and then later on moving towards an agentic platform, because we started powering everyone. So we ended up realizing like, hey, like you can not only be like a foundational layer for everyone, you need to be a foundational layer and an orchestrator as well for agents and other products. So we ended up building the end-to-end products as well. But it was like trial and error most of the time.
Okay, that's cool. So I think you're responsible for go-to-market effectively, and on that side, you've gone from 25 million to $500 million in 3 years. It's a similar trajectory revenue-wise that I've seen at Mistral, and on the outside, it looks great. Behind the scenes, maybe not always as good as it looks like in TechCrunch. So can you tell us a bit about some of the things that broke? You know, what did you have to fix along the way?
Everything.
Other company, everything.
What doesn't break? Like you've been there. You've also built companies, so like you've been there. But I think like the reality is like back in the day when we launched the product and we started gathering traction, like BCs, and I'm also a BC, so I consider myself one of those ones. But we are actually pretty bad as BCs at forecasting what's actually going to happen and talking to founders as well, right? So all of the BCs were telling us like there is a lot of AI tourists. So you should expect that you're going to see crazy churn in your platform. So don't hire too many people. Just take my money because like, hey, I want to back you, but just take my money. But like also account for the fact that it's going to be crazy churn. So like you should just like try to figure out how you handle all of that stuff. And that churn, we never saw it, right? And we never saw it, interestingly. But what it forced us was actually to operate in a very lean environment where like by the end of the first year, we had already achieved $1 billion valuation, 1.1 billion. After going live, we had passed $30 million in revenues and all of that stuff. And we were still less than 20 people. And that essentially meant like everything was like breaking all the time. We were running out of GPUs. The platform would just like give us a ton of errors. But one of the things that we did really well is spending a lot of time building the payments infrastructure, because we believed that like if we wanted to scale really well, we couldn't have people issuing invoices manually, even if it was on the enterprise side. So everything was breaking except the billing platform, which was very interesting.
Okay.
We also underinvested in hiring, right? So we kept it like so lean to the point that like everyone was working like 17 hours a day. It was just absolutely crazy. People didn't have personal lives. We don't have personal lives, but like it's a thing, right? So like kind of like all of the things that possibly could break ended up breaking except the billing platform.
Okay. That's great. I mean, so that's a good segue. When we think about enterprise, I think one of the, again, I've seen this at Mistral, is there's very few drop-in AI solutions that work, at least work long-term. And I think you've said publicly that you're trying to get something like 70% of your revenue to be enterprise. How do you kind of balance, or what's the trade-off that you think about when it comes to white glove service, getting in the trenches with your customers versus, billing is one example, but more of a self-service kind of solution?
I think it's a cultural change in the organization as well. So, and you always put the example of like Airtable. Airtable was amazing. In 2022, they ended up like doing the transition towards like an enterprise motion, living outside PLG, and they officially said, we're gonna shut down the PLG motion, individual users, we wanna have companies. They went through this like death ballet for like 18 months to almost 2 years, like because the culture was so ingrained on the PLG side that it was extremely difficult to actually migrate and make sure that people were passionate about building the unsexy features for the product. The way we did it initially was we had some targets. We knew that like enterprise was going to be the biggest focus for us. It was the only option to actually sustain the valuation and continue to grow. So everyone was kind of aligned in that element. We ended up deploying forward deployed engineers, but something that we ended up like took us like a very long time to do, and we only started doing it earlier this year, is this idea of like services about how do we go to a company and tell them like, what do you need? We have all of these like foundational models. We have like the agentic platform. We can actually stitch a lot of things together and build you an actual product that is customized to you. What do you need? But one of the core components to that is like forking the actual code. It's like you have like, then now we have like two sides. Like one is the core product, and then we have forks based on like individual customers, individual countries, and so on. That was extremely challenging, and we only ended up doing it earlier this year because of forward deployed engineers. So like there is like cultural change, there is an organizational change that needs to happen as well to be able to actually convince people that forking the code is the way to go. It's going to have a ton of problems down the line, but it's a way to go to build the services, right? So you end up building all of these layers, hiring more senior people. If you truly want to actually deliver services to enterprises, you can not only have people that like have been doing sales for the past 4 years. You need people that are seasoned, that have been doing it for 15, 20 years, that have gone through these transformation projects with companies. So there is a number of layers that we had to put in place. And today, like more than 50% of the revenues come from the enterprise. But it was just like, it took a while to get there.
Okay, it's interesting, just going slightly off script because I'm just curious about this now. When you go to market with one of these solutions, you must come up against some of the horizontal platforms. Are they typically in the customer first and you're working together on a solution, or are you kind of taking lead? How do you think about that?
So like we compete with a lot. So like I think like every single, like these days, like when you talk to any enterprise, they're like exploring 3 or 4 solutions at the same time. So whether that is ElevenLabs and Google and Decagon and another one, or there is like any other combination of that, or is like OpenAI or Anthropic, you compete with multiple of them, so you end up like, but we also power all of them, right? So it's like a funny approach where like we compete, but at the same time, like, hey guys, by the way, like if we sign a contract or you sign a contract, we still win, right? So like it's a kind of weird, like funny environment. But at the end of the day, like we just like try to go and win. What we always see is OpenAI and Anthropic. So OpenAI and Anthropic have contracts with like all of the enterprises around the world these days, right? We don't compete with them directly because they provide more of the LLM foundation layer. Yes, they're going on the application layer stuff as well, but we see them on an actual competition going deep in the workflows for some specific core. We see other companies that actually are much more verticalized on some sort of like use cases that enterprises are actually trying to incorporate in there.
Okay.
And I think like the only way that you win is like essentially with forward deployed engineers, having a better like value proposition. And the core is research. Like I think these days when we talk to big enterprises, it's fundamentally like, okay, so we do all of the core research. We power the entire world because more than 90% of anything that is AI voice is ElevenLabs these days across all of the markets. But we are the ones who actually do the core research. So if you want to be at the forefront, having early access to all of the foundational models, all of the stuff, we're here to serve you, right? I think like the combination of like pitch elements is what essentially gives us the edge.
Okay, that's great. So you talked a bit about team there, and you know we found it's difficult to build out world-class go-to-market teams in Europe. It's happening now, but it's there's not as much depth in the market. I think you talk about having a pretty aggressive quota, like 20x the base salary for everyone that comes on, which feels really ambitious. And I'm just curious, how did you get there? And does that sort of select for certain kind of personality types? Anything you've learned? Should that be best practice? Yeah.
Yeah, so 20x is like our motto. It's like it's become a thing. But it just came out because like for the first 9 months when we started selling the first product and we came out, it was only myself. So when I hired the first 2 account execs that would essentially like help me with the accounts globally, like I told them like, I don't know what the actual number is going to look like. This is how much I'm actually generating for the business, and I'm doing it like across the board in all of the markets. I think we can do 20x, but don't get me wrong. If we see that like later on the 20x doesn't hold up because like it's too high, I'm gonna do the right thing and I'm gonna lower the quota or like give you reliefs or like compensate you correctly. So don't worry about any of that stuff. I mean, I can tell you like they were very skeptical, the first 2 that I hired, but they ended up joining. And they were like, okay, let's do it and see how it goes. And then everyone was smashing quota all the time. Even today, like last year, more than 90% of the employees reached quota.
Wow.
In the first quarter of the year, 167% quota attainment during a Q1 this year, right? So these days we have more than 10 people in the AI account exec team that have already reached the full year quota. And we still we are getting started in June, right? So I think it's like the numbers are actually working well, but it's the fact that like we have very ambitious targets, and if we see that like it's not possible to reach it for a number of factors that are outside of their control, we will do the right thing. We lower the quota for a quarter, we do some reliefs, we do whatever we wanted in that end to make it fair for them. Okay. And that's become like our motto and like the standard way of operating. Because I do believe that like you need to be fair, but at the same time like sales teams, go-to-market teams need to be pushed. Like it's very smart people that are very ambitious, very competitive. They don't want to have like a tiny quota they can reach because essentially they need to be like challenged. So that's what we found is like the right hybrid and the right like type of mentality. But I would also say like personality-wise, ElevenLabs is not for everyone, right? And I've said it a bunch of times, and I usually call all of the candidates before we make an offer and tell them like, hey, like we will make an offer, but just to be sure that you know what you're getting in, you're gonna work really hard. It's gonna be like extremely exhausting. You're gonna have to put your personal life at the side for a while. So there's all of these core components. No hard feelings. If it's not for you, absolutely fine. I understand it. Hopefully we'll work together again in the future, but you just need to know.
Yeah.
And people accept it, and people like the one actually like have the level of ambition, they end up joining and doing fantastically well.
Yeah, you're self-selecting for the right group. Is that mostly been built out in Europe, or do you have
globally? So we have teams now in Europe. We have like the US, like Mexico, Argentina, Chile, Brazil, Singapore, Korea, Japan, India, Middle East, Australia, New Zealand. So we have people all around the world with the same type of mentality, which is also very interesting because from a cultural perspective, different markets have different level of ambitions, operate in a different way.
Yeah, because there's about 600 people or so in the company now. I mean, as you think about going from $500 million to multiple billions over the next couple of years, at least for the bit that you're responsible for, I mean, do you feel like you have to make fundamental changes to scale that organization? Because it seems like a complex task.
I mean, I think like we're trying to like, we're adding AI go-to-market agents, right? So that like we make people 50% more productive, and that was the goal for this year. I think we're actually really good on that. But at the same time, I think like you need to scale the team. Like especially if you're serving enterprises, it's not possible to actually optimize for one single resource. You just need to actually deploy more resources. And if you're competing with other companies, even more, right? So yes, there's like some structural changes that we need to do at some point, restructuring the go-to-market team and number of different departments. But it's part of the fun, I think. Like I've always told the team, like if we're not changing the structure every 6 months, is that we're not growing at the same pace as the company. So people are already prepared to actually like change jobs or change like markets or like do things that were not done before.
Yeah. Okay. Cool. I'm going to change topics here briefly. I've been a founder, operator, and an investor, but never at the same time. You're doing both at the same time. And I'm just curious, you know, do you feel like that gives you an edge as an investor or as an operator? And maybe you tell us a bit about what you're doing as an investor as well.
100%. So I back companies in the pre-seed, seed stage. I write like 350K tickets fairly quickly and so on, very technical teams and all of that stuff. And I think like the beautiful side is because like I've built ElevenLabs in all of the global markets, then I can actually help all of the founders also enter the markets. And that's how I actually have a lot of fun. So I really enjoy my job fundamentally because I get to build companies, but also I get to invest in the next generation of companies and then helping them enter in those markets, get the relationship running and introducing them to people. It's like actually quite funny, quite fun when I do it. So I really enjoy it a lot doing both ends. The downside is like you don't have that much time left.
Yeah.
So, but it's the downside.
Yeah, I guess it's additive. I mean, as a founder, I think that's kind of the investor that you would like to have, is someone that's actually in the trenches and knows how to do these things. So that's great. And I guess for the people that are in the room, as they find product market fit, the founders I work with always have this dilemma: do I just go and scale because the market may disappear, I could land grab, or do I go back and build for the long haul? You know, maybe fix some things that are broken, get everything in place, and then build out a sales and go-to-market team, and then scale. what would be your advice to people that find that first signs of PMF?
Look, I don't think like I don't think you're gonna be able to do anything perfect. I think like we all learn as we go. I think what like I would split it in two. One's like you need to fix issues for companies or for people that are like fundamentally hard to fix. That's how we add value to society. If we wanted to do like things that are easy, we should not be here. We should be working for Google, right? Or like any other one. Nothing against Google. Sorry if anyone from Google here, but like there is a lot of like really hard problems that like founders can actually be fixing, and those are the ones. But like when you're building a company, I actually think like the more mistakes that you make in the early days, the more chances of success you have. Fundamentally, because you're testing as many avenues as you can. And then you will find what actually works and what doesn't work. For me, I get worried when like someone is taking too long to actually go to market with their product or iterate on their ideas. Like you need that flexibility because like otherwise within a weekend you can have another 25 competitors that popped up of nowhere and they're gonna move much quicker than you, right? So I think like that's like the two balances in there.
Okay, great, go quick. Well, this is fantastic, we're out of time. Thank you so much, appreciate
Thanks.
it.